Hi, folks. Steve Urban here, host of the Riderflex podcast and founder and CEO of our day job recruiting firm, Riderflex. We hope you enjoy this episode. And as a reminder, please subscribe to the podcast for updates and news. Finally, if you haven't already, check out the series of books we've published on hiring, interviewing, and overall career advice titled The Riderflex Guide, available on Amazon. And now, a quick word from our sponsor.
Most homeowners don't have the time or expertise to properly take care of their home, which causes costly issues to arise. That's where Kira Home Maintenance comes in. We're a full-service, routine maintenance company that was developed by a certified home inspector. Each quarter, we service our clients' homes following manufacturer's recommendations to properly maintain all the necessary appliances. We provide the materials and expertise to prolong the life of your property, creating a healthy and efficient environment for your family. From top to bottom, we'll maintain and service your home. To get started, we have a property inspection to determine what needs to be maintained, and a maintenance plan is created based on your preferences. From refrigerator coils to filters, vents, and drains, we do it all, and we do it well. Contact us today for your free routine maintenance inspection, and never worry about your maintenance again.
Joe Brew on the Riderflex podcast. How are you, Joe?
Good. How are you, Steve?
First thing I got to ask about, and I'm sure you've gotten this a million times, like the last name Brew, growing up with your buddies. You had you had the coolest last name in high school, right? I mean, come on.
I think it really came into fashion in college, right? But okay. Yes, it's a great name. In addition to meaning beer, which is unto itself great, it also means coffee, as does the word Joe. So you can brew a cup of Joe. And there was a period of my life where I worked at a coffee shop with a girl named Laurel Coffee, which is also amazing. So my caffeine addiction, I fully blame on my name, and I won't get into my beer addiction, but it's there.
Now you're single, like when you're single life, right? What a great opening line. You walk up and you're like, yeah, my name's Joe Brew. And they're like, no, come on.
Well, it's funny. It's such a good last name, and this happens to my siblings too, because I have three of them. Rarely do people call me Joe, or did they call me Joe growing up? I was Joe Brew to everybody. And my sister was Anna Brew, and my brother was Ben Brew. And there's such short names that you can just say it as one, so you can call me Joe Brew if you want.
I totally get it. Now, you spent a lot of time in Spain, right? Or did you grow up in Spain?
I did not grow up in Spain. I do live there now. My wife is Catalan, so that's a region of northeast Spain.
Okay.
So it's kind of home now.
Gotcha. But you went to college there, right? You got you did a bunch of schooling there.
I did. So I went to undergrad in the United States, Swanee, Tennessee.
Okay.
And then
Tennessee, I don't hear any of that accent in there.
Well, I'm a Floridian, so we're hard to classify. I'm a Southerner, but an interesting one. And then the rest of my schooling I did outside of the U.S. So I was in France, Spain, Denmark, Netherlands, I cool. Met my wife while studying a master's in public health in Spain, and fell in love with her, of course, and fell in love with Europe, and that's where I'm raising my three kids.
Was she in the classroom and you looked over and you're like, okay, I need to find out who that is. Tell me about how did it happen?
Was not, it's funny. So I lived when I was doing my master's, I was dirt poor, and I lived in a house shared by 10 students. And two of those students were Catalan, so from this region of Catalonia. And I remember they were friends of mine, these two young ladies. And I remember just finding it so fascinating. As an American, I wrestled with this idea. What do you mean you speak a different language, but are you Spanish? Are you not Spanish? And I just thought that was a cool, interesting thing. And in Coloma, my wife came to visit one of them because they were friends. And that's when we met. And you kind of hit it off. I had that summer, I was scheduled to go to Ethiopia for the summer, to northern Ethiopia, Tigray, a very difficult region, to do field work in maternal health.
Wow.
And she joined me, right?
Oh.
It was kind of like, this is a trial by fire dating. And so we were
in
Ethiopia a few months.
I would say so.
Yeah, but you learn a lot about a person when you take them outside of their comfort zone. and we hit it off and we bonded and we said, hey, you know what? This works really well, actually. And I feel like in those few months together in Ethiopia, we got a few years worth of dating experience, and that's
Now,
great,
I'm envisioning, like, are you talking like hot, like the bug nets, like the bed that's in one of those like kind of half, not even like a
Yeah, so
house.
so
I'm trying to visualize this.
yeah, I mean, later we moved to Mozambique, which is southern Africa. We went there with our, at the time, 1 year old, and that was very much a super malaria endemic region. We stepped in the bud net, 40 degrees Celsius, 104 Fahrenheit every day. But Ethiopia was different. It was highlands, so it was really, high altitude,
Oh,
which one
what
is
is the
great.
altitude?
I
Yeah, what
mean,
is
where
it?
we were, I think it was around 2,000 meters, so 7,000 feet or so, high enough that there's no
Oh,
malaria. There
I
was
see.
plenty of other disease. Tuberculosis is very prevalent in the area,
Mm,
HIV, AIDS.
right.
But it meant that you didn't have to sleep in a bed net. You didn't have to take malaria prophylaxis. It was one of the great things about Highlands, Ethiopia.
Did you I mean, this is, you're talking about, you went to high school in Gainesville, right?
Gainesville, Florida. So I'm a
How
Gator,
did a Gainesville, Florida boy end up traveling around the world to different places? Let's go backwards. Let's go backwards.
Yeah.
Tell me about mom, dad, siblings. What'd your dad do? Give me some history here so I can
Sure,
kind of
yeah.
tie this together.
I grew up in Gainesville. In fact, I was just there the other day visiting.
Okay.
Um, Gainesville is a great place. It's a North Florida, and North Florida is very much the South. It's a kind of traditional,
Yeah. Yeah.
old school place. Swamps and rivers and springs and oak trees with Spanish moss. But it's also a big university city, which brings a
Big
lot
time.
of diversity.
That's
In
true.
terms of people from all over the world coming there to study, teach
Right.
there,
Yeah.
research there. I think my parents, there were four of us growing up, four kids.
Okay.
There are four of us, and they did a very good job of instilling in us a sense of openness and kind of wonder at the world. So
Right.
everything from, the kind of, let's say, exotic Korean biochemical students who were doing their PhDs to the, Central American farm workers who were marching through town to, I saw how my parents related to those different kinds of people and
Okay.
treated them as equals and people to learn from, and that instilled in me a sense of kind of wonder and curiosity about culture, even though I didn't travel a lot growing up.
Okay.
And then I was really fortunate to go to a place, I went to university in Swanee, Tennessee. Swanee is a very small university, but liberal arts school, but, does a really good job of exposing young people to the world. So I went and studied abroad. I got funding from the university to do summers in different places. Guatemala, I was going every
Nice.
summer.
That's
And I
great.
got to kind of see the rest of the world a bit as a young man. And I fell in love with, international work. And that's kind of how I stumbled upon public health, because it's something that's so applicable to international work.
No
If you
doubt.
get your JD or your MD, you're kind of locked into a country. But if you study public health, hey, people need health everywhere. So as a way to keep kind of all the doors open in terms of the globe.
What'd your folks do? What'd your dad do? What'd your mom do?
Yeah, my mom is still a kind of farming expert. So she works a lot in organic farming and kind of translational farming practice. So teaching communities, schools, et cetera, about farming and, kind of, let's say, farm to table stuff, school programs, farming as part of education.
Okay.
Um, and my dad is an engineer. He worked at a power plant, kind of a blue collar job. Uh, you know, I would say like their professions were not super influential in me, and it was more
I
what they
was
were doing outside of work that,
okay.
when they were with me, that had a lot of influence on my growing up.
Now, see, I just assumed you were going to tell me your dad was like a doctor or a lawyer or whatever since you went on to get your doctorate. That's interesting. How about that? Well, how about, are you the only doctor in the family?
I never thought of it. I guess I am. I mean, I
Okay.
actually don't think much about degrees. The more time I spend with a lot of people with a lot of letters after their name, the less I don't think they really signal anything besides kind of the willingness to waste your 20s. So I don't pay much attention to it, including my own. I'll never present myself as doctor, especially given that I have no medical medically helpful experience of any sort. But
well, you're a humble guy too. That's nice. Were you always straight A's, good student? I mean, did you venture
no,
out a little
I
bit?
think I'm a typical male in
Okay.
that we bloom a little bit late. We
Okay.
have to be motivated to apply ourselves.
Did you have a little fun at Tennessee, down in Tennessee? Did you venture out a little?
I did, I mean, by the time I got to college, I had a reason to be motivated, right? I had seen that, hey, education can open lots of doors.
I see.
Middle
Okay.
school, high school, maybe a different story.
I got you.
I was also in college. I was an athlete, so and I still am. I love to run, and
Ah,
that has I mean, athletics teaches you all sorts of lessons in life,
no
right?
doubt.
About discipline, about perseverance, about
No doubt. No doubt.
consistency. But it also has the good fortune, especially when you're at those formative ages, kind of keeping you out of trouble, right? So a
Yeah,
Friday
true.
night, if you're thinking about the competition the next day, you're less likely to,
That's a good
make
point.
too many mistakes. So I think by almost sheer luck of being an athlete, I stayed out of. I
Did
didn't
you
have too
run?
much fun in
Did
college.
you run all 4 years?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
How about that? Oh, wow.
Of
Okay. Hey,
course.
anybody, and I'm a recruiter for a living, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
I'm, anytime my team is talking to somebody that played college sports all 4 years, I don't care what division it is. If they worked part-time, went to school and played college sports all 4 years, like I want to talk to that person. They're coachable, great work ethic, great people skills,
Yeah.
team oriented, all the rest of it.
Yeah, and that's my experience too, right? Knowing lots of fellow athletes. I also worked part-time all through college, right? Just to make ends meet. But I used to think it was just fun, and it's like I just like to win, I just like to race and stuff like. And then you realize you're actually touching on something much deeper. I think a lot of collegiate athletes. I was D3, by the way, and
Yeah, but
by no
still,
means
doesn't matter.
a
Doesn't
big
matter.
deal. But
Yeah.
but a lot of collegiate athletes, they finish college, they don't go on to be pro, and
Right.
and
Well,
they have this.
most.
Oh yeah, exactly, and they have this kind of hole in their life, and a lot of them rediscover sport a little bit later, as I did. So later in my 20s, I realized, like, man, I'm missing something in my life,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's that consistency, that routine. I mean, even it's just the ability to enjoy a meal after a really hard workout, the
Right.
good night's
Totally.
sleep you get when you're a little
Yeah.
bit
Yes.
drained, and so I've rediscovered sport, not with a sense of, oh, I want to win things, but just as part of my like general well-being. And I got to tell you, now working, quote unquote intellectual work, where you're trying to get your brain to come up with ideas and solve problems, so often the best ideas come in that 1 hour of forced silence. I mean, almost
Yes.
meditative silence, where you're out on a
Yes.
run, a swim, a bike ride,
Totally
and
agree.
not just staring at a screen or in a meeting, right? So I think it's such a good routine breaker to have some sort of athletic discipline in your life, regardless of what it is. It could be lifting weights, or it could be,
Anything. Anything.
dancing, whatever.
Anything. I was just telling my wife the other day. I said, here's when I get my ideas. Here's the three places when ideas pop into my head, because my brain has enough room to think about it without staring at the screen or looking at the laptop. When I'm in the shower, I actually have a little voice recorder like on a shelf outside the shower where I can just reach out and like.
That's genius.
So in the shower, on the treadmill, and then I live in Colorado, so I do a lot of camping in the mountains. And so if I'm in the mountains where I can't get connected and I have time to think, I'll come back with 10 ideas, So you're right. Yeah. It forces your brain to be able to get creative. So
100%. And you don't even have to try. The reality is, when you take away distraction, the
yes.
brain has processes that are ready to go, and they start piecing things together, and you
Yep.
just sit and don't constantly expose yourself to dopamine through social media or whatever, and the brain starts to say, hey, wait a second, what if we did this way instead of that way? And then you have that one of those breakthrough light bulb moments.
Couldn't agree more. Real quick, I know we'll get into business, but did you say three toddlers or two?
I have three, so one girl, two boys. Actually, the youngest is turning 2 today, so we had kind of a cupcake and candle morning. And the others are 5 and 8. So I'm in the thick of it,
Wow. So you decided to do a startup, try to raise a Series A, and have 3 toddler little kids at home all at the same time. Congratulations.
It's I don't have a lot of free time, but I like enjoy everything I'm doing, So I'm I get to my bed at the end of the day, put my head down and fall right asleep.
Yeah, I'm guessing. Yeah, I'm guessing it doesn't take you long to fall asleep.
Yeah.
What's your wife do? Well, she's busy with 3 little toddlers at home, so I'm guessing that's a big part of it.
Yeah, so that's job number one is kind of rearing the kids and running the household, which is no easy feat.
Oh yeah,
She's a teacher by profession. She has a master's degree in educational psychology.
okay.
She was teaching for several years. She stopped now, and she's starting kind of a space in our town. We live in a very small town for kind of alternative pedagogical activities. So outside of school, how do you engage your children in
Oh,
young children, right? Her specialty is early childhood education. How do you
okay,
engage your
okay.
children in activities which are healthy, where they're growing, where they're learning, but are not kind of the forced discipline of, school structure, because they already
And
get so
hopefully
much of
it's
that.
and you're talking about doing stuff besides staring at their tablet, I hope.
Yeah, of course. And she's a big fan of the Joseph Steiner Waldorf tradition
Oh,
of
oh,
education, which is
okay.
very much about, simplicity and, like even the toys don't have faces. You don't have like a police toy. You just have a wooden block, because then it can be anything and you use your imagination. It's a police one
Yeah.
day and it's a doctor the other day and it's a teacher the next day. So very much trying to stimulate children's imagination and kind of do education through play.
Now, with your relationship, husband and wife, and her having that degree, does she go, so Joe, now how does that make you feel? Does she start analyzing? Does she start?
Fortunately, I think she limits her application of her expertise to children. Although I'm like very close to her target population in terms of maturity, I do think it does. I mean, it's a huge. I benefit, and our family benefits greatly because she's an expert in children. And so I my kids are acting up one way or another. I have an instinct to, hey, let's do this. And she's like, hold on a second. Maybe he just needs to cry it out. Maybe he needs to feel this way. Maybe we need to listen to it. And so I learned a ton from her. I mean, also she's
Cool.
been a teacher for many years. So
Cool.
the amount of person time she has taught is far more than any parent can accumulate. So she's got a
Yeah.
lot of experience with kids, and I benefit from that for sure.
Cool. Well, I appreciate you sharing some of that stuff with the listeners, Joe. Thank
Yeah,
you
of
for
course.
some of the personal. So, what were you going to do? You get out of school. What was the plan? What were you going to, traveling around, you analyst, data scientist? Talk to me before
Yeah.
Hyfe, what was the plan?
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of early 20s, a wanderer and trying to figure it all out. At one point, a guy who was really formative in my thinking, he's a professor of medicine at the University of Florida, epidemiologist. Now he's in his 90s, I think. This Parker Small, he gave me a book called The Death of a Disease by a guy named D.H. Henderson. And none of us know Henderson's name. He's not famous. We know the local football star, but we don't know this guy. And then he was the guy who, for the CDC, led, and then the WHO later led the smallpox eradication campaign in the 70s. So basically, eradicated smallpox, right?
Now, see, isn't that crazy? Isn't that, you just touched on a nerve right there. Yeah, we know the local college football wide receiver name, but meanwhile, we don't know that guy's name. You would think that guy would be.
Of all the things humanity has done, think of the stuff you learn in elementary school. We went to the moon, we built the pyramids, perhaps our greatest accomplishment is the eradication of smallpox. Just
Seriously,
in terms of
it's up there.
Yeah, and in terms of human lives saved. And it's a gift given to us by this generation of people like Henderson. That gift keeps giving and giving and giving, because every year 1 million people don't die of smallpox. And because it's a non-event, we don't even notice it, right? But Parker Small's gift to me of this book and his kind of prodding at me to say you should do public health, and he convinced me that, look, if you want to save, because at one point I toyed with maybe going back to school and doing medicine. He said, if you want to save dozens or hundreds or thousands of lives, go and do medicine. And if you want to save millions of lives, go and do public health. He was trying to kind of steer me away from medicine and towards public health, which I didn't even know was a thing, right?
All right.
And that set me on a course where I got really interested in it. And Henderson is such a great example of a guy who none of us know about, but he saved millions of lives. I mean, millions and millions of lives, because he was able to do these. His patient was not an individual, his patient was a population. And in his case, it was the global population. But there are so many public health problems, from infectious disease like malaria, tuberculosis, HIV, AIDS, to chronic stuff,
that many Americans don't see, but you've seen traveling around. You've seen, what a vast majority of Americans haven't seen, right? You've seen
Yeah,
real problems.
and
You've
I would
seen,
even, I think it's true that the kind of big burden of infectious disease is no longer as large in the United States. But I mean, the United States also, we have populations that suffer unduly. I mean, diabetes, chronic heart disease, obesity. There are epidemics raging that get no airtime. They're
yeah.
not flashy. They're not trendy. But they cause a lot of suffering, and to the extent that you can move the needle ever so slightly on any of those things, you can affect thousands of people's lives.
Isn't the stat obesity is like 40% or so? It's some massive number, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't know the exact number. But it's interesting. I think of obesity a lot because I go back and forth between Europe and the United States, and it's just drastically different numbers.
Oh, I bet. Oh,
And I
yeah.
will tell you, I know Europeans really well. I know Americans really well. It is not a question of willpower. It's not, hey, just get up and shake it off and go to the gym. It's a
What is
question
it?
of an obesogenic environment. In the United States, there are food deserts. It's extremely difficult to get around without a vehicle, meaning that people are forced to drive everywhere.
Okay.
And in Europe, the same people with the same kinds of attitudes about exercise end up much healthier because the environment kind of lends itself to healthy activities
To
instead of
moving around, to walking 3 blocks instead of
yeah. I mean,
driving.
in many cases, if you live in downtown Paris, you
You
can't
don't have a
hop in your
car.
car and drive to the grocery store. You have to walk. And that repeated over the course of a lifetime is the difference between a
I
healthy
see.
heart and functioning muscles and a
Mm.
kind of narrow waistline versus being obese. So I think there's so much judgmentalism around it, and so much of this idea that somehow it's a personal decision or a personal behavior when it's not. It's really a collective thing, and we have to build collective spaces that promote and make health easy, as opposed to making health very difficult. I mean, imagine the typical, like, oh, I'd love to ride my bike to work, but you live on the side of a 6-lane highway and it's a death sentence. I mean,
That's a good point.
I think the United States has a really long way to go in making healthy choices easy for people. Healthy food, healthy living, healthy modes of transport. And unfortunately, I don't see a lot of progress on that front, right? If anything, it's going the opposite
Changing
way.
that overnight is going to be super hard.
Yeah.
And now we just worry about, now we try to just create drugs or shots that we can give ourselves to make ourselves lose weight, right? What's the new hot one right now in the press? Ozempic or something? I don't even know.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I don't follow the space closely, and whatever people need to do it, right? And I'm not at all opposed to the medical interventions as well, but that stuff is so downstream to these bigger problems that we have in the United States, which is that it's just very, very difficult to remain healthy when you're in an obesogenic environment,
I want to ask you just a couple more questions about just health in general, public health in general, globally. Can you give us just a 1 or 2 stories of just things you've seen when it comes to sanitation or fresh water, or the lack thereof on either one, in a country or a place where you've been, where you just go back to your tent at night and you're just like, holy shit, I just cannot believe Americans take so many things for granted, just turning on the tap water and watching fresh water come out. And these people, I mean, can you give us a couple of stories if you don't mind?
Sure, yeah. Dirty water largely kills young children, right?
Okay.
So diarrhea is we think of it as kind of an inconvenience or an embarrassing, kind of funny thing to joke about. It's one of the largest murderers of children on earth, right?
Didn't know that.
Diarrhea. Cholera is one disease that causes diarrhea. Is prevalent in a lot of developing areas and can kill. I mean, basically by dehydration, right?
I was just going to say that's what happens. They just get dehydrated. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And if you happen to live 3 minutes from a hospital or from an ambulance call away, once your baby starts convulsing as their electrolytes and fluids go down, you call them up and somebody jumps in and you get an IV and you probably save that kid's life. If you live a 7-hour walk from the nearest health center, which is likely to be unstaffed because of government resources, that kid dies, right? And diarrhea is preventable. Diarrhea is treatable, just like malaria, which is preventable and treatable, another mass murderer of
Fresh
children.
water, fresh
Yeah,
water.
and exactly. And you know, we have methods for water sanitation. It's not mystery. It's not rocket science. We know how to do it, and it's a question of resources, right? And it's resource allocation and our values as a society where we put those resources. If you think of, you know, air, breathing air as a right and not a privilege to be purchased, it makes every drop of sense that water should be the same way, right? No child deserves to die from dehydration, regardless of the economic decisions of their parents or the fact that they didn't build a hydration system or a filtering system. So I mean, I think there's a human rights perspective on a lot of diseases, especially those that affect children predominantly, like those, you know, waterborne diseases, like, you know, all the different things that can cause diarrhea. That I think it's just a non-negotiable. Like every single child deserves clean water, and every single
Couldn't agree
child
more.
deserves rapid treatment when sick. You know,
And same for sanitation, right? I mean, they can't
absolutely.
just they can't have sewage flowing in a trench out back.
Yeah, but you know, people don't choose to defecate in the open or build a trench with the sewage. That, you know, it's a lack of resources. It's corrupt governments. It's money going to the wrong places. And nobody wants to live in filth, right? So
Well,
like,
I wouldn't think so.
yeah. So, and I mean, I've seen this again and again. I've lived in Nepal. I've lived in Mozambique. I've lived in Guatemala. I've seen cases that of illnesses that should never have happened in the first places, and then once having happened, of severe cases that never should have gotten severe, and then sadly deaths that never should have occurred. And you know, we talk a lot about life expectancy, and life expectancy used to be 40 and now it's 80. And you know, it's not that people used to die at 40 and started living to 80. People used to die at 2 and 3 and 4.
Yeah,
That
it
was
skews it skews the averages.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so these countries, if you look at South Sudan, right, or the Democratic Republic of Congo, or these countries that are Afghanistan, that are chronically low on the life expectancy, it's largely not people dropping dead at 43 years old. It is
They do have
children.
older people over there.
Yeah, exactly. And if you get through those really dangerous first few years of life, those first 5 years of life, your likelihood of living to be 80 is actually pretty high, even in the really poor countries. It's these mass murderers of children, right?
Yeah.
Malaria, pneumonia, diarrheal disease.
Yes.
That I think it's kind of just insane that in 2023 we haven't, you know, prioritized.
So this is a really hot topic with me, and I want to ask you this next one. And if you don't feel comfortable answering, we can always edit it out. It might be too politically sensitive. I don't know, but you know, I've had a lot of people on the podcast, a lot of people that are world travelers, people that live in other countries, and folks like yourself that have been around the block. And I just feel, especially right now, Joe, I feel like over the last 24 months, picking on the Gen Z a little bit in the US, you know, I just feel like there's so many things that the younger generations right now in the US just take for granted because they haven't seen real problems, like not having a toilet to use, you know, or not having fresh water to drink. And then I visit with these guys on the podcast and they're like, man, you know, some of the shit we complain about in the US, like Mary's complaining because she didn't get invited to the birthday party. Meanwhile, you know, in Africa, they just wish they had a toilet to use. They don't care about the birthday party. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's worth going easy on people, because largely that kind of apathy or indifference towards the suffering of fellow man is largely driven by ignorance, right? And it's really, I think a lot of folks don't know what's going on in the world, right? And they don't know how good they have it, and they don't know how bad others do. And it doesn't have to be the poor rich world divide. I mean, look, I've got functioning legs, right? I will never be able to understand what it's like to be in a wheelchair. And what, you know, I don't even notice the stairs that I skip up on my way into the office or something. And so there's all sorts of forms of privilege that are not the typical archetypical, hey, this is privileged and this is not, right? I happen to be, for the moment, free of mental illness, right?
Yes.
And I don't
Thank
have
God, me too.
the bear of depression clawing down on my shoulders, and what that means for my day to day. And so yeah, absolutely, infectious disease and sanitation are huge issue, huge global
Huge,
issues. That, but
huge.
there's so much other things, and you know, in Africa, you're right. Many people would kill for clean water, but hell, they would also like to be invited to the birthday party of their friend down the street. You know, and in some ways, we're so similar to them. I mean, across different countries, across different cultures, and so I
Would
say,
you?
like, I think it's the duty of educators, and not just formal educators, teachers, but anybody who's talking to young people and has the chance
Yes,
to
there we go.
influence people, to point them towards sources
Yes.
of not to lecture them on things, but to point them towards sources of interesting, real truth and experience that kind of shakes them out of their comfort zone and wakes them up. I was really fortunate to have received a good education. You know,
Yes.
one that shook me
Sounds
to
like
my
it.
core and made me really uncomfortable with lots of things. And I think that's not a question of virtue. That's just a question of something I received. I got a gift. You know, somebody gave it to me, and that's amazing. And I can't hold any sort of resentments against those who didn't receive that gift, right? I can just try to
Yeah.
help share the gift, which is education and awareness.
Your parents did a great job. By the way, are they are mom and are they still they're still alive, I guess, aren't they?
Yeah. They're still alive.
Are
They're
they
not together, but they live in the same neighborhood, so they cross each other, you know, walking dogs and things like that. And when I go to visit, I just kind of hop from house to house, you know.
are they upset because the grandkids are in Spain, or they're like, come on, man, Spain is a long way. I can't see those
You know,
grandkids.
they love to visit. So, and
All right.
Spain is a great place to visit.
Okay.
So I'm sure they would love some more real FaceTime with grandkids. But hey, it's nice to have an
Uh,
excuse to go to Spain
I'm
every
asking
year.
you that because I have two granddaughters and they both live out of state, and I'm still mad about it.
Oh yeah, I mean, I get it, dude. Like I
Uh,
think you don't understand what it's like to be a parent and how much you love your kids and how much until you have them yourself, right? And now the idea that somehow my kids would go off and move to some other country, and I almost want to
Dude,
forbid it, you know?
and I'm not telling you this next thing to make you feel bad, so I'm not trying to rub it in. I'm 56, and like I've cried, you know, I guess I've cried like hard, like maybe 3 or 4 times in my adult life, right? Like not very often. But man, when my oldest son told me he was taking Rose and they were moving out of state,
Oh yeah.
I bawled like I was 3 years
I get
old.
it. I would too, right? So
I
I
was
guess
like,
I
oh
guess it
my
doesn't get
God.
any easier.
Anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to rub that in. Okay, let's get into it. So how does Hyfe come about? Give us the beginning journey. Tell us kind of how it happened, and then we'll go into what it does.
Yeah, so Hyfe is a cough company. We're obsessed with cough. And it's not because of it's some narrow niche and we're just trying to do something weird and strange. Cough is the world's most prevalent symptom. It's the primary reason that people show up at a doctor's office. And it's a symptom that's, you know, in everything from chronic conditions like COPD or asthma to infectious disease, you know, flu, COVID,
I mean, every time you're sick,
tuberculosis.
if you're sick with anything, the cough's in there, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And you know, if you think about the experience of modern medicine, precision medicine, you go to the doctor and you get poked and prodded and measured in every way, right? They're sticking things in your ears, they're taking temperature, they're taking blood, they're running tests.
Mm-hmm.
Think though, when you go with a cough, this important symptom, what do? They ask you, how's your cough? And you're supposed to somehow answer not knowing almost anything, even about your own cough. And then that doctor who knows even less than you is going to treat your disease with that bit of information, and then a couple days later say, hey, it's working, how's your cough? And you say it's better. I mean, it's like, think of measuring temperature before the thermometer. You just put your hand on the, hey, it's hot, it's cold, you know.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
think of managing blood pressure, hypertension. Imagine doing that without a cuff, right? Without, like, it would be not only poor medicine, it would probably be criminal negligence if I treated you for hypertension without actually taking your blood pressure. Meanwhile, people are being treated for cough all the time without measuring anything.
You know
And
how
it's
I make my
bizarre.
doctor measure it? Anytime I had a bad cough and I'd go to see my doctor, like I'd hear him about to come into the room, and I would start coughing a lot more to make sure.
Well, that shows you it's even worse of a measurement because suddenly he's taking
Exactly.
this as his ground truth
Exactly.
when who knows how sick you really are. So cough needs to be measured. That's just a truth. I don't think it's controversial. Ask any doctor. Would they like to know when and how much and what kind of coughing their patients are doing?
Yes. The answer
Absolutely.
would be
Of
yes.
course.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yes.
And unlike temperature, where you can actually measure it right then in the doctor's office, it's very hard to measure cough because it's this sporadic longitudinal thing. And I mean, unless the doctor's going to come home with you and sit by your bed at night with a
Exactly.
stopwatch and a clipboard, that they're not going to know how much you're coughing at night, right?
Yep. Yep.
And so we came to this idea that cough needs to be measured first and foremost years ago, thinking about tuberculosis, right? This classic infectious disease killer. I had been living in Nepal working on tuberculosis projects. I was working with Dr. Peter Small. He was the former head of the Stony Brook School of Global Health. Okay. He's now the chief medical officer of Hyfe. And we just realized, man, cough it's already so useful in tuberculosis. It's used to diagnose. It's used to monitor the effectiveness of treatment. Why aren't we doing more with cough, right? Okay. And so we started, collecting audio of coughers, of TB coughers, looking at audio, looking at, can we actually use algorithms to filter out between, say, coughs and non-coughs? Could we use that then to count coughs?
Well, like volunteers? Were you doing like case studies, like college students?
Yeah, exactly. It was volunteers. It was small studies.
Okay.
It was kind of a side project. I was working largely in case finding in Nepal. Peter was managing a lot of projects at the time. It was the side thing. Hey, what about using microphones, right? And think about it. This was 2018, 2019. Turns out, even in the poorest countries, the most remote areas, everybody had one of these things, right? A phone. And that had a microphone. And that was just a game changer. The fact that people like a Nepali sheep herder was walking around with a microphone on him all day. And isn't that an interesting opportunity to do something cool, right?
Okay, I see it.
So we had this kind of side project where we were just playing with it, and largely for academic purposes, research, wondering, hey, what happens with cough? Well, can we describe cough? Can we differentiate cough from non-cough? Could we maybe envision something that we could get a grant for or something? It was a side project. And then COVID hit. And with COVID, if you kind of rewind in your mind back to 2020, early 2020, there's this spread of this crazy new scary pathogen, which appeared at the time to have mortality as high as 10%, right? And it was in China, and then it was in Lombardy, Italy, and in Iran, and then in Spain and Madrid, and then New York. And this disease was spreading around the world. One of the symptoms, right, was a dry cough. And we had no other way to know. I
forgot about that. Now that you mention,
right. I mean, people were locked down. We had no way to know, really. Tests weren't readily available. Yeah. And we had this idea like, hey, this cough stuff we've been talking about, maybe it's applicable to more than just tuberculosis, right? And maybe in the absence of testing, because there was basically no testing in February, March 2020, right? Maybe we could use people's microphones, which they're all carrying around, as a way to detect cough. And then you could imagine if you detected cough across a population, you'd be able to see, hey, this town is coughing a lot more than that town. Maybe there's more COVID there. So this idea that somehow we were going to create almost heat maps for cough, the spread of this pathogen, and detect it over space and time. And that's kind of when we said, hey, let's take this cough stuff seriously. Let's not do it as a side project. Let's like see if we can figure something else.
So now, but now you're getting into bootstrapping, cash raise. Plus, you need a developer to build the app for you because you guys are doctors, not app builders. So now you're having to gather a team and get some cash together.
Yeah, I mean, so this was a little bit before cash. This was just like, hey, what if instead of spending 10 minutes a day on this, we spend 3-4 hours a day on this, right? And then, what if we made this into a company? Like, what if we made a product? Because we want this to be on all the microphones. It's got to be on all the phones, and then it's got to be an app. And if we need to, like you said, right? So, and we kind of went through a few people in our network. A fellow who had worked a lot, built a few companies on his own, Julian Circo. He's a Romanian living in, at the time, South Africa. Now he lives in Austria.
Okay.
And he had a young guy he had worked with on a number of projects, health software apps, Paul Rieger. And the three of us were the co-founders, right? And we said, hey, let's do this thing. Let's try this thing. No money at the time. Let's make an app which would apply these AI algorithms, which I had kind of written, but half-assed, and ship those on Android and iPhone out there into the wild and see if we can start counting coughs. And maybe this will be the killer COVID app, right?
How are you going to get? How did you market to people to get them to sign up?
We didn't. We just stuck it out there, right? And I think we made a landing page. I don't know.
People started signing
about
up.
It. And
people started signing up.
This is where things get really interesting, and this is one of the most useful startup lessons I could perhaps impart on others. Is in order to learn, you have to do. You can't learn first and then do. You have to do so as to learn. And so we thought we're going to make a COVID app, right? And because everybody's doing COVID right now, this is going to be a killer app. What you just said. So how did the people start signing? Who's signing up for this, right? People with COVID didn't really want to download this app. They were busy worrying about COVID, right? But we still started getting dozens and then hundreds and then thousands of downloads from chronic coughers, people who didn't have COVID, but for whom cough was itself the disease, right? And I was coming from an infectious disease background. I had never even heard of chronic cough. I did not know that chronic cough was a disease, and
I would never think of searching for the word cough in the Google App Store,
because you don't have a chronic cough. But if you were one of the 4 to 10% of Americans who have chronic cough,
I see,
you already live with this discomfort. You already have trouble going to your kid's piano recital or a movie theater. Or coughing mid-meal and spitting out your food. In the case of a lot of women, which primarily affects women, there's a lot of urinary incontinence caused by cough.
I didn't know that.
People that break their ribs because they're coughing so hard. I mean, there's chronic cough's a real thing. I had no idea. But what's so great about doing so as to learn, as opposed to learning so as to do, is we did this thing. We shipped this app. It was half-baked. It was bad.
Were you paying for like ad marketing, AdWords? Were you like paying anything to make it?
Nothing. We just stuck it out there. We just stuck it out into the wild, right? I mean, we weren't even taking ourselves serious at this point.
I love it.
Let's just do this, and
so good.
And then these people started showing up.
And you're calling your buddies. You're like, holy shit, we got like 200 more downloads today.
Yeah, like who are these people downloading? And then they would leave us reviews. It'll be like a 3-star review.
Oh,
and it would be like, hey, this is great, but I went on a hike and it said I coughed 500 times. I think it was detecting my dog's bark as cough or something. The app was not good. It was half-baked.
Good feedback.
It was super useful feedback. And they were so desperate for something, some tool that would help them manage their experience, that they took the time to write to us. They stuck with us. We'd write back and say, hey, thanks so much. We're now going to retrain the model, teaching it that dog barks are not coughs. Please stick around. And then a week later, they'd say, hey, look, it works now. It's no longer picking up my dog's barks.
Wow. And you know what? That user is now a user for life because they felt like they contributed.
Yeah. And so we had a ton of these experiences, and we built one thing we built a product thinking it fit the market in a certain way. And it turns out it didn't. It fit a completely different market, but we never would have learned that workshopping or whiteboarding or brainstorming. We never would have. We couldn't stumble upon chronic cough because we were too ignorant. What we had to do was build something, put it out in the wild, and then the chronic coughers stumbled upon us.
How about that?
Right? And in some ways, I mean, we still have lots of researchers using Hyfe and our algorithms for infectious disease, for COVID, all sorts of applications. And it's not that this is not useful for infectious disease. It's just that our sweet spot, our real product market fit is with chronic cough because it's so neglected, because it's so useful for chronic coughers and in the management of their symptoms, right? To be able to quantify this thing, because the applicability when you have a disease that lasts 365 days a year is much greater than when you have an acute infectious episode that goes away after 3 days. Go ahead.
Yeah. I was going to stop you there for just a second and tell the listeners, Hyfe is HYFE.ai, Hyfe.ai, right? That's correct.
Yes,
URL.
correct. Yeah.
Yep. And you can find Hyfe on Apple and Google. I'm assuming both, either one.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, because I know now I'm edging up on your time. I want to ask you, Joe, does it cost to download the app?
No. So right now, no. In the United States, Cough tracker is free, will remain
Okay.
free.
Okay. And
And,
how are
and the
you,
rest of
what
the
is your,
world,
what,
Cough Pro will one day transition to a premium model.
okay.
And
How are you
that's
making money? What's the business model?
yeah. So we license we've been talking about our apps, right? Those are out there in the wild. They are great. They are a way that we learn a ton about coughers with COPD, with GERD, with refractory chronic cough, with infectious disease, old people, young people. I mean, it's a great source of data collection
Okay.
for us. It is not our revenue model.
Okay.
Right?
What is the revenue?
Our revenue model is we're a B2B company, and we license our algorithms, our cough detection and analysis algorithms and analysis platforms to those that are studying cough. So this is researchers and pharmaceutical companies.
I see.
And to those who want to use cough to save money. So this is remote patient monitoring companies who are very interested in preventing costly, let's say, hospitalizations or emergency room visits from those with, let's say, COPD, asthma, congestive heart failure. I mean, people who are being remotely monitored, hospital at home type situations, knowing when their coughs deviate from baseline, when they have an episode coming, if you can identify that early and intervene, you prevent that person from showing up in an emergency room. And if you're the payer, if you're the insurer, or you're that monitoring company, that knowledge is extremely valuable. So
okay, so I see your end consumer. What does the what does the consumer get out of it that's downloading the app? What's it doing for me if I'm downloading the app? What do I get out of that?
yeah, so in the case of, like, let's say pharma, it wouldn't be some consumer downloading the app. It would be a clinical trial where you might be wearing a wearable.
For me, if I get the app,
Yeah.
what's it doing
so
for
in the case of somebody out there in the wild who downloads Cough Tracker in the United States, right?
Yeah.
What you get is the ability to monitor and quantify and analyze a symptom that you never previously could, right?
And what am I doing with it? Giving it to my doctor?
Yeah, well, often, yes. So we hear a lot from users that they show up at the doctor's offices, and doctors are actually really interested. They say, "Oh, wow." And for many, it's a kind of validating experience because the doctor, for the first time ever, takes them seriously. When they say, "I cough all the time," and they're like, "Okay, yeah." And then you show them, "I cough all the time," and they see 900 coughs in one day and 135 coughs from 3 a.m. to 4 a.m. They say, "Oh, wow." Often, the therapeutics for chronic cough, there's not a lot of actual drugs out there. And a lot of it is behavioral. So there's behavioral cough suppression therapy, for example. And a lot of it is related to triggers. So people who have chronic cough, it's way worse in certain contexts. But if you don't have good data on this, you actually don't even know what your triggers are. You just, one day you're coughing terribly, one day. But once you can see that data, you can say, wow, isn't that interesting? I cough every day in the afternoon, right around 2 p.m. I get really bad. And then you realize it's right after I eat. And that one day that I skipped lunch because I was busy, I didn't have that cough episode. And that leads to an insight, which is, if I cough after I eat, maybe this has to do with the pH in my gut and I have GERD, right? It's acid reflux, basically. Whereas another person might have, man, isn't that crazy? I'm coughing 100 times an hour. And then when I go to sleep, I don't cough at all. If you're not coughing while you're sleeping, it's likely, quote unquote, tick cough. It's a neural connectivity issue, a hypersensitivity, and an overdeveloped cough reflex, and therefore you're likely susceptible to, say, P2X3 inhibitors, which is a new kind of therapy for treating people with tick cough.
The app is giving me this information. So I am getting, as the user of the app, I'm getting useful information for me. It's not just data that you're getting to sell to Pfizer.
Well, what's so interesting about chronic coughers is that they are already kind of citizen scientists, right? So we don't need to say, hey, you have GERD. One, because that's kind of a dangerous area to enter and start diagnosing.
I got you.
And two, legally you can't, right? Regulatorily, you have to go through. But just displaying this information. I mean, it's like, look at your step count, right? You know when you're being sedentary or active just by looking at your step count. You don't need somebody to translate that to, hey, get off your ass, right? So it's a similar kind of thing. Chronic coughers, give them this data, the hourly cough counts, for example, and let them see the trends. They know in many cases what to do with it. Now RPM companies, it's a different thing. They might want kind of an alert system, right? Imagine a fire alarm in a way. Like, we want to know when a COPD exacerbation is coming. We want to know when a congestive heart failure decompensation episode is occurring. And what we're doing on the AI side is partnering with researchers, harvesting data of people with these conditions so as to build algorithms that can identify these events. right? So
Very
that we can
good.
say, you
Very
have
good.
this patient has a COPD exacerbation coming. It's time to intervene, right? That's the end game here.
The people that are buying your data, are they supportive enough to help you get more users? I'm guessing are they like, yes, get us more users? Yes, we want more data. Are they constantly pushing like, here's $1 million of marketing money, get more people to download?
Yeah, I mean, so most of we have so many users. I mean, we have tens of thousands of users from whom we've
Okay,
collected cough sounds, and at some point the returns on that are
I
diminishing.
see.
We
I
just don't
see.
need that much data. What we really need and what we are focused on right now is users from research trials. So this is not the person who downloaded the app out in the wild, but rather a person who's enrolled in a study because they have a known condition, and because that doctor or researcher with whom we're partnering can give us not only that cough data which we're collecting through our applications, but also their medical information, right?
Okay.
So we can send this user into a study. That study, now we not only have, let's say, these 750 coughs for Steve during the course of his hospitalization, but we also have his age, the drugs he was on, when the drugs were initiated, his outcome, whether he's intubated or he died or he had a good recovery, and it's the pairing of that hard to get medical data with all of this cough data that allows you to build these algorithms which predict medical events and outcomes, right?
Do you see this? And I know we're out of time. I'm going to ask you one more question here, if you don't mind, as we wrap up.
No rush.
Do you see it? I'm going to use a comparison. I use a CPAP machine.
Yeah.
Now, I'm guessing, I don't know the history on CPAP machines, but I'm guessing at first, maybe it wasn't FDA approved, or not FDA, it wasn't a drug, the Federal Drug Administration hadn't approved it. I'm guessing insurance companies didn't cover it at first, whatever. And then somebody was like, hey, look, man, this machine supplies all this cool data about how this guy's breathing at night. And then at some point, insurance has started covering it. It's approved. Do you see,
exactly.
Do you see that? Is that where you're headed?
100%. It's inevitable that cough counting is coming, right?
Okay.
And there's a number of players in the space. We're the best at it. I hope we remain the best at it.
Great.
But it is too important and too interesting and too relevant for it not to become a common medical use case. Right now, we're in the wellness space, right? The same way you can count your steps, or you can put a heart rate monitor on and go for a jog.
But that's changed. That'll be changing. You'll be jumping the creek.
It is. And in fact, we've already carried out a trial for FDA clearance validation, to show that this works. We're in conversations. We've had 3 pre-submission meetings with the FDA. We'll submit at the end of this year for clearance, so that this can be integrated more into medical decision making, right? But we know that it's a process, and we got to do step by step. And right now, this is a completely new biomarker, a completely new endpoint, right? And so just allowing people to know how much they cough, a lot of people are doing a lot with that information, and that's fine, right?
Bootstrapped to this point, or seed money, angel?
We've raised, we got some non-dilutive funding early on, to do some work, especially in the developed world or the developing world, which was kind of our sweet spot.
Do you mean grant?
Grants, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Then we raised a seed.
You did.
And we've also got a significant amount of revenue. So especially, like I said, this chronic cough space, a lot of pharma companies in particular said, hey, we want to work with you, right? We want to license your algorithms. We want to consider running you in our trials. We want to get to know chronic coughers. We want to build tools for chronic coughers with you. Cough Tracker, for example, in the United States, we've built with Merck Pharmaceutical, because Merck is extremely interested in the future of chronic cough. It has a lot to do with the fact that they have a chronic cough medication.
These guys have people like Merck already said, hey, look, we'll just buy you right now?
They haven't. We're not in a rush to be acquired. We think we're building really cool stuff, and we really love working with them.
Okay.
But who knows?
Yeah, who knows? Hyfe, Hyfe.ai, Hyfe. I could probably ask you a million more questions, but I've already kept you over, Joe. Sorry about that.
No problem, man.
Congratulations, my friend, on everything you're building. I think your next round of funding will go well, especially if revenues are significant. That always helps those Series A rounds.
That helps. It puts us in a better negotiating position.
Now you're the CEO, so you're gonna be shaking hands, kissing babies, trying to get rich people to write checks. So good luck with that.
Yeah, it's part of the job,
It is. Joe, thanks for being on the show. I appreciate you.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, Steve. Thanks a lot.